You wake up. It's the year 1387. Your bed is made of straw, your ceiling is leaking, and your entire room smells like wet goat, but not in a fun way, if that could ever be a thing. Your linen shirt clings to your back, soaked in a gentle sheen of medieval panic sweat. You've just had a dream where you were clean. In it, you could smell nothing. It was beautiful. Tragically, reality smells like boiled cabbage and your cousin's foot fungus. Your name doesn't matter because in this century, you're not famous, noble, or particularly clean. You're just a tired, slightly itchy human, with 3 teeth too many to be a peasant and 3 teeth too few to be a merchant. You're somewhere in between, that liminal space where you can afford to eat turnips but not afford to flavor them. So before you get too cozy with the idea of 14th century hygiene, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see who's falling asleep to the soothing stench of medieval armpits around the globe. Now let's get back to the smell. Or rather, the problem of it. You see, in the 1300s, body odor was less of a personal issue and more of a social consensus. Everybody stank. Equally. Like onions, fear, and a medieval public latrine on market day. So the goal wasn't really to smell good, it was to not smell worse than average. Because if you did, you might attract suspicion, disease, or worse, attention from the town gossip, Agnes, whose nose was as sharp as her tongue. You shuffle to the cracked mirror on your wall, not glass, no. Mirrors back, then were basically polished metal. You stare into it. It does not flatter you. Nothing does. Especially not the suspicious yellow crust developing beneath your arms. And this, dear viewer, is where our historical adventure begins, with the eternal human quest to not reek. Welcome to medieval deodorant. It was less about blocking sweat and more about masking your existence. A noble goal. A futile one. But humans tried anyway, scraping, dabbing, dusting, praying. Yes, praying. Because if soap couldn't help you, maybe Saint Hyginus could. He's not real. I made that up. But it says a lot that you believe me, doesn't it? Now, let's take a moment to appreciate the medieval bathing schedule. If you're a commoner, you bathe when the weather permits, when the river isn't frozen, or when the parish priest doesn't accuse you of vanity for using water on your entire body instead of just baptizing your sins away. So, maybe once a month. Or if you're lucky, twice a year. And when you do bathe, it's not with soap as we know it. It's with a lumpy, gelatinous substance made of rendered animal fat and ash, which sounds like a Pinterest disaster, but was actually quite effective at removing your dignity. Still, you try. You do your best. You slap on a blend of herbs and hope. Maybe you rub crushed rosemary into your armpits. Maybe a friend gave you sage, not to use, but to chew, because apparently, chewing herbs to freshen your breath was a thing, and someone thought if it worked for the mouth, why not the pits? You try it. It burns. Your eyes water. You smell like an overcooked pork roast. The elite had more options, of course. If you were a lady of the court or a merchant's wife with disposable income and a faint awareness that you smell like sin, you might own a pomando. Picture this, a tiny metal orb filled with fragrant materials, cloves, ambergris, musk, cinnamon, dangling from your belt or necklace, like the medieval version of a scented car freshener. Except you are the car, and the road is your husband's weird banquet, and the exhaust is your pores. These pomandas were so popular they became fashion accessories. Some were carved with delicate filigree, others looked like metallic Death Stars of lavender. But the goal was always the same, surround your personal stench cloud with a stronger, more pleasant cloud. Like fighting a house fire with a lavender candle. And speaking of musk, let's get into the horrifying details. Musk wasn't synthetic back then. It came from the scent glands of a male musk deer. Yes, really. Someone, somewhere, thought, you know what smells nice? That angry deer's backside. And thus, a fragrance empire was born. Ambergris, too, another beloved scent base, was basically whale vomit. Or whale poop. The jury's still out. Either way, it came from the inside of a whale and was sold by the ounce to the rich, who didn't care where it came from as long as it distracted them from their own humanity. If you were poorer, and let's face it, you had to get creative. Charcoal dust, vinegar, and even wine were all used as primitive deodorants. That's right, You could literally dab wine onto your pits, not to get drunk, but to smell less like the inside of a plague cart. Did it work? Probably not. But it gave you something to do while you waited for death or dinner, whichever came first. There was also the medieval fascination with scented gloves. You might own a pair, if you were lucky. These weren't just to keep your hands warm or stylish, they were soaked in perfume. Why? Because people would literally sniff their gloves to escape the surrounding horror. Imagine you're at a banquet, sitting next to a man who hasn't washed his feet since Lent, and you discreetly raise your glove to your face like a 14th century gas mask. It wasn't subtle. But then again, neither was anyone else's aroma. Now let's talk about one of the strangest facts of all. Many people didn't think body odor was bad. They thought it was necessary. Yes, truly. Some believed that sweating and stinking were part of a healthy bodily function, a way to release excess humors. According to humoral theory, which governed medieval medicine like a drunken uncle at Thanksgiving, balance in your bodily fluids was essential. So if you blocked your sweat, you were essentially bottling up your sadness, rage, or bile, and that was just asking for a demon to take over your pancreas. So people were cautious about not sweating. Too little, and you'd get sick. Too much, and you'd be accused of gluttony or lust. No middle ground. Medieval logic was like that, equal parts creative and horrifying. And this brings us to your morning routine. After waking up, scratching suspiciously, and muttering a prayer to Saint Odoratus, also not real, you proceed to freshen up. You dab a mixture of vinegar and crushed mint under your arms. It's sticky. The mint stings a little, and the vinegar makes you smell like an angry salad. You put on your one tunic, which you've worn every day this week and will continue to wear until it gains sentience and walks away. You step outside. The sun is already up, and so is the smell of your neighbor's chamber pot being emptied into the street. You nod politely, trying not to inhale. She nods back, unaware that she has unknowingly contributed to your slow sensory demise. By midday, your homemade deodorant has given up. The mint is dead. The vinegar has evaporated. Your body has resumed its natural fragrance, which can only be described as pungent disappointment. But you're not alone. No one else smells good either. The entire village smells like a failed cooking experiment. The air is thick with livestock, humanity, and the medieval version of just vibes. Sometimes you walk past the perfumer's shop. It's more of an apothecary/guesswork facility, but it smells divine. The shopkeeper is 87 years old and has no sense of smell left, which is a blessing, really. He sells tiny jars of scented oils if you can afford it, which you can't. But you pretend to browse. You sniff a jar of lavender oil and feel a deep, aching sadness in your soul. You will never own it. But for a moment, you felt like royalty. Smelly royalty, but royalty nonetheless. By the time evening rolls around, you're back to smelling like a footnote in a tragic poem. But it's okay. The sun is setting. Dinner is boiling, probably a stew of root vegetables, regret, and a questionable chicken leg. The smoke from the hearth fills the room and masks the worst of your odor. Not because it smells better, but because it smells stronger. And that, dear listener, is how you survive another day in the medieval world without deodorant. You don't smell good. You don't even smell passable. But you smell normal. And in this era, normal is a victory. As you lie back down on your straw mattress, which smells like mildew and your own dreams slowly decaying, you think about the people of the future. You imagine they probably smell like clouds and justice. You dream of soap that lathers, of clean shirts, of not sharing bathwater with 7 relatives and a goat. You fall asleep to the gentle crackle of the hearth and the soothing lullaby of barnyard animals committing mild acts of terrorism outside your window. And you dream of a world where armpits are tamed, shirts are clean, and nobody rubs deer glands on their collarbones to smell nice. But that world is not today. And so you sleep, in your vinegar-scented tunic, on your scratchy straw mat, dreaming the sweet, impossible dream of deodorant. You wake up. Again. It's a new day in the same century. And shockingly, you still smell like despair wrapped in wool. The sunlight streams in through a gap in the wooden shutters, and you're briefly blinded by the glare off your own forehead. You wipe it with your sleeve, which already smells like fermented sadness. Congratulations, your armpit-to-fabric symbiosis is evolving. Your dreams were vivid last night. You dreamt you were in a hot shower, the water cascading over your body like forgiveness. You even had shampoo, whatever that is. But now, here you are, awake, cold, itchy, and suspicious of your own feet. You sniff once, then you regret it. The odor is a complex blend of leather, hay, yeast, and shame. A medieval perfume, if you will. Outside, the birds are screaming. Not chirping, screaming. Because they live in this century, too. And like you, they've never smelled a bar of soap that didn't double as a weapon. You stretch, dislocate something minor, and begin your morning ritual, scratching, muttering, and trying to remember if today is a feast day, a fast day, or just another episode in the long-running drama called You Smell Like a Dungeon. Let's zoom out for a moment. You might be wondering, was deodorant even a thing back then? Sort of. Kind of. In the way that hitting your head on a table counts as a headache cure. It existed, but mostly in the form of folk remedies, superstition, and whatever plants you hadn't eaten yet. Because remember, in the medieval world, everything was either food, medicine, or witchcraft. Sometimes all three. Take alum, for example. It's a naturally occurring mineral salt, potassium aluminum sulfate, if you want to impress the 2 surviving chemists in your village. People discovered that rubbing alum under their arms could reduce sweating and body odor. So yes, congratulations, you're now the proud owner of a medieval crystal stick. Not a luxury. Just a rock you rub on yourself while pretending your problems don't exist. The irony is, alum is still used in some natural deodorants today. Which means people in the 1300s and people on TikTok in 2025 have at least one thing in common. They're rubbing rocks on themselves and pretending it's wellness. Of course, not everyone could afford alum. If you were poor, and let's be honest, you might use ashes, baking soda, or even crushed seashells. Just imagine rubbing gritty mollusk dust into your armpits first thing in the morning. Exfoliating? Technically. Pleasant? Only if you've lost all sense of touch and dignity. But here's where it gets extra medieval. Some people believed that stinking was good for you. That's right, your body odor was seen as a protective force. A kind of stinky shield against disease. The logic went like this: bad smells drive away bad spirits. So if you reeked, congratulations, you were basically a walking pest control system. And during the Black Death? Oh, the theories were rich. Doctors wore beaked masks filled with herbs and spices, not because it worked, but because it made them smell less like corpses and more like anxiety. People carried posies and clove-stuffed oranges just to fend off the smell of death. That's where the nursery rhyme "Ring Around the Rosie" came from. Yes, your childhood was built on plague-scented nightmares. But back to your daily life. Today, you have a market to attend. You're going to buy turnips, haggle for onions, and possibly catch lice from a handshake. You want to make a good impression, so you decide to freshen up. You chew on some parsley, rinse your hands in rose water, borrowed, not owned, and, in a moment of reckless optimism, you dab a little urine under your arms. Why? Because someone told you it works. And technically, yes, aged urine, called lant, was used for everything from cleaning clothes to whitening teeth. If you've ever wondered how far humans will go to avoid being stinky, the answer is into the chamber pot and beyond. Now, let's talk social status. If you're rich, you don't necessarily smell better, but you smell more expensively. The wealthy could afford perfumes imported from the Middle East, spikenard, frankincense, myrrh. Basically, things that smelled like a holy shrine caught fire. They doused their clothes, gloves, and wigs in these fragrances until they radiated opulence and mild chemical warfare. Some nobles even had their clothes boiled in perfume. Not washed. Boiled. As if drenching your doublet in lavender broth was a substitute for not being covered in sweat, wine, and existential dread. Imagine walking past one of these nobles. Their scent hits you like a floral sledgehammer. You blink. You cry. You reconsider the invention of noses. But even that didn't guarantee success. Because body odor in the Middle Ages wasn't just a physical issue. It was a moral one. Smelling bad could get you labeled lazy, sinful, or, worst of all, French. Which, depending on the political climate, was considered a serious problem. In monasteries, things were different. Monks had strict rules about cleanliness. Sort of. Bathing was encouraged, especially in Benedictine communities, but only when it didn't interfere with praying, fasting, or copying depressing manuscripts in a freezing scriptorium. Some monks bathed once a week, others once a season. And their deodorant? Prayers, mostly. Maybe a dab of lavender if they had access to the garden. But mostly, they embraced their odor as a test of divine patience. You, however, are not divine. You're just a guy with a wet patch under your arm and a dream. Let's talk fashion. Did the clothes help? Not really. You wore layers, linen undershirts, wool tunics, possibly a cloak, all of which trap heat like a medieval crockpot. And don't even think about breathable fabric. That concept won't exist for centuries. Your tunic holds sweat like a sponge and smells like a regret. You might try airing out your garments, hanging them in the breeze. But let's be real, they just end up smelling like wet barn. So eventually, like everyone else, you settle into the comforting resignation that your clothes are you now. You are one with the funk. Back to your day. You arrive at the market. You greet the butcher, who smells like pork, blood, and faint sadness. You nod to the fishmonger, who smells like low tide and marital tension. No one comments on anyone's scent. That would be rude. And besides, you're all in this together. You purchase some dried herbs, thyme, sage, maybe a bit of rue. Not for cooking, of course. You're going to hang them in your room like a medieval Glade plugin. Maybe even stuff a few into your shirt collar for a subtle scent burst when the wind blows just right. You walk home, tired but slightly more aromatic. Your feet ache. Your shirt clings. A bee investigates your armpit, drawn in by the scent of fermenting vinegar and botanical desperation. You swat it away and remind yourself it could be worse. You could be French. Back home, you prepare your evening ritual. A splash of cold water. A rub down with a cloth that hasn't been properly washed since the last harvest. You light a candle. Not for light, for masking the smell. You lie back on your mattress, listening to the creak of the wood beams above you and the distant sound of someone vomiting into a bucket. You reflect on your hygiene journey. It hasn't been easy. You've dabbed herbs, sniffed gloves, bathed in vinegar, and questioned every decision leading to this point. But you survived another day. Smelly, yes, but alive. And really, that's what matters in a time when hygiene was a gamble and deodorant was a concept whispered only in herbalist circles and alchemist fever dreams. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, you might try a new blend. Maybe juniper and lemon balm. Maybe garlic, just to keep people away. Or maybe you'll give up entirely and let nature reclaim you. Either way, the dream lives on. The dream of not stinking. Of not offending livestock. Of maybe, just maybe, smelling like nothing. And so you drift off, covered in herbs, reeking of vinegar, heart full of hope. You wake up to the familiar scent of your own body marinating in a rich stew of sweat, goat fat, and regret. The straw mattress has taken on the shape of your body like a judgmental mold, and every time you shift, you release a new note from the grand symphony of your personal stench. You're not sure whether to describe it as earthy musk or haunted latrine. It's nuanced, complex, like a cursed wine. Outside, the rooster crows at an unreasonable volume, possibly to cover the fact that it also smells like despair. You stretch. Your joints pop. Your tunic clings in all the wrong places. It's another glorious day in the medieval world, a time period where deodorant is more of a prayer than a product. Let's be honest, you smell worse than usual this morning. You vaguely remember dancing at last night's feast. The kind of dancing that involves a lot of sweating, shouting, and falling into puddles of unknown origin. Someone handed you a roasted turnip, and you used it as a maraca. In short, it got weird. And now, your body is the battlefield of that experience. Your pits? Damp. Your feet? Frightening. Your breath? Somewhere between pickled eel and hot parchment. And your hair? A sad haystack clinging to your skull like a frightened squirrel. You sigh and swing your legs off the bed. The rush of cold air on your feet reminds you that your socks have fused to your skin. Not metaphorically. They are actually, molecularly, becoming part of you now. You peel them off slowly. One crunches. You decide not to look at it. Not today. So before you do anything else, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Only if you enjoy this strange blend of history, sarcasm, and body odor. And let me know in the comments, Where are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you right now? Because I find it fascinating that somewhere out there, in the dead of night, someone is drifting off to the sound of me describing foot rot in 14th century England. Truly, the internet is magic. Now, back to your personal hygiene crisis. Today, you're trying something new. A recipe from the local herbalist who lives near the edge of the woods and may or may not be a witch. She gave you a mixture of crushed rosemary, salt, and something she called mystery root. She also winked ominously and mentioned dreams filled with screaming geese, but you're ignoring that part. You take the mixture and rub it under your arms. It burns. Immediately. Which is probably a good sign. You don't know. This is medicine in a world where leeches are used for everything from headaches to existential dread. At least it smells better than your usual armpit and anxiety combo. Let's talk about why you smell like this all the time. Medieval people weren't necessarily opposed to cleanliness. It's just that their definition of clean was flexible. For many, a quick rinse in the river once a week or month was enough. Soap existed, but not like the kind you're used to. No lavender-scented pump bottle. No fluffy loofahs. Just harsh, lye-based soap that stripped your skin of dirt, oil, and possibly dignity. And yes, it smelled terrible. Most soaps were made from rendered animal fat and ashes, so you basically ended up smelling like bacon on fire. Not the worst thing, unless you were vegan. Which you aren't, because no one is vegan. This is the 1300s. You eat what doesn't bite you first. Now, let's get academic. For a moment. Deodorants, as we think of them today, things designed specifically to stop you from smelling like a crypt, didn't really become common until the 19th century. But humans have always been aware that they stink, and they've always tried to fix it. In ancient Egypt, people applied perfumed oils to their underarms. The Romans used powdered alum and bathed obsessively, like they were trying to scrub away the guilt of empire. But in medieval Europe, hygiene was a weird mix of superstition, faith, poverty, and improvisation. So what did people use? Let's say you're feeling fancy. You might crush mint leaves and rub them under your arms. Congratulations, you're a breath mint now. Or maybe you smear your armpits with vinegar-soaked herbs. You're still stinky, but now it's artisanal. If you're rich, you might have access to actual perfumes imported at great cost and hoarded like relics. These were made from ingredients like ambergris, whale vomit, civet, cat gland secretions, and musk from deer butts. So basically, you covered up your body odor with exotic animal fluids. Glamorous. If you're poor, and statistically, you're working with local options. Clay, ash, dried flowers, maybe a pouch of lavender sewn into your shirt collar. You are a walking sachet. Not effective, but vaguely hopeful. There were even beliefs that strong-smelling substances could purify the air and protect you from illness. So you might find yourself carrying a pomanda, a little metal ball filled with cloves, cinnamon, and lies. You wear it around your neck, like a medieval air freshener. It doesn't help, but it makes you feel like you're doing something, which is basically the entire medieval approach to medicine. Let's talk about sweat. You sweat constantly. Not because you're athletic, but because the world is a furnace and your clothing is made of wool, linen, and poor decisions. And there is no antiperspirant. Nothing to plug the ducts or block the flow. You're leaking. Constantly. And your sweat mixes with dirt, bacteria, and animal hair until your body becomes a science experiment. What's worse, you can't even change clothes regularly. You own 2 shirts, maybe. One for feast days. One for everything else. They haven't been washed properly since the harvest festival, and you're afraid they'll disintegrate if you try. So you do what everyone does. You pretend the problem doesn't exist. You avoid lifting your arms. You keep your social radius small, about 2 feet, and hope for a strong breeze. But sometimes, things get desperate. You remember the neighbor's daughter mentioning something about rubbing nettles under her arms to scare the sweat away. That sounds awful. So naturally, you try it. You find some stinging nettles, crush them, and apply them under your tunic. You immediately regret this. The burning is intense. Your eyes water. You start to hum a prayer. Not because it helps, but because you need something to drown out the screaming of your skin. Congratulations, you've invented medieval capsaicin deodorant. You lie down to recover. Your armpits are now red, angry, and slightly tingly, like they've seen something they weren't supposed to. You mutter to yourself, maybe today isn't the day for experiments. Maybe today is a vinegar day. As you dab yourself with the last of your precious herbal tonic, you wonder if people in the future will ever have to go through this. Will they have solutions? Bottles? Sprays? Magical potions that stop the stink before it starts? Then you dismiss the thought. That sounds like witchcraft. And you know what happens to witches. Night falls. You lie back down on your straw mattress, the scent of rosemary and singed skin lingering around you like a warning sign. Your limbs ache. Your head is heavy. Somewhere outside, someone's arguing about fish prices. You tune it out. You close your eyes. You dream of fountains, of clean sheets, of waking up and not having to sniff your shirt before deciding whether it's wearable. It's a beautiful dream. It smells like fresh linen and a future you'll never live to see. But that's okay, because tomorrow is another chance, another experiment, another deeply questionable attempt at smelling slightly less medieval. And so you sleep, surrounded by your failures, your herbs, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow you'll stink slightly less. You wake up to the sound of a cow relieving itself in the alley outside your window. Again, it's your medieval alarm clock, loud, wet, and vaguely traumatic. The air is thick with the scent of manure, stale beer, wood smoke, and whatever's fermenting in your neighbor's basement, which, let's be honest, is probably a relative. You blink. You sniff. You regret both actions immediately. Your armpits are doing their usual morning performance art. Sweat, a tragedy in 3 acts. Your mouth tastes like you've been kissing dusty onions, and your shirt has achieved a new texture, somewhere between crusty linen and lightly salted tree bark. Congratulations. You are now officially more textile than mud. As you swing your legs off the bed, your foot lands squarely in what might be a mouse. Or a figure. Hard to tell. It scurries. You mutter a string of curses, so ancient, they haven't been spoken since the last time someone tried to invent medieval mouthwash. Which, incidentally, involved mint leaves, stale ale, and 3 Hail Marys. But hey, it's not all bad. You didn't die in your sleep. Your mattress didn't catch fire. And the lice in your beard seem to have formed a non-aggression pact with your eyebrows. So today's starting off strong. After all, the sun is up. The dung carts are rolling. And you smell like you've just come back from a pilgrimage through every bad decision you've ever made. With no deodorant to speak of, it's time to once again improvise your way through the horror that is medieval personal hygiene. Let's zoom in on your current strategy, masking. Not the paper kind that modern humans wear to stop pandemics. No, you're masking in the way a medieval peasant masks, by pretending that if you put enough herbs in your armpits, you'll smell like something other than damp cheese. Your current concoction? Rose petals, mint, and a sprig of mugwort, ground into a paste using the back of a wooden spoon and questionable optimism. You scoop some out and smear it under your arms. It's cold, wet, slightly gritty. One petal sticks to your elbow like it's afraid to go in alone. For a brief moment, you smell better, floral, hopeful, like someone who hasn't given up. You feel powerful. You walk outside with a little more swagger. Then you pass a dung heap and it's all over. Nature has reasserted itself. This is medieval life. You are in a constant war with your own smell, and the only weapon you have is whatever's growing in the garden, hasn't been peed on by livestock, and doesn't burn your skin off. Let's explore a few more advanced techniques, shall we? First, we have the glove trick, popular with noble women who understood, correctly, that men were disgusting, and socializing with them required defense mechanisms. Ladies would perfume their gloves with jasmine, ambergris, or cloves, and press them to their noses when men approached. You, of course, don't have gloves. You have hands. Bare, calloused, deeply suspicious hands. So you settle for stuffing some crushed rosemary in your sleeves and hoping the breeze does the rest. There's also the vinegar rinse. You heat some water, toss in a handful of sage, and splash it under your arms like a medieval cologne. It burns a little, which either means it's working or you're slowly dissolving. Either way, it's an improvement. Now you smell like a salad that's lost the will to live. If you're feeling brave, you might even try smoke bathing. This involves standing over smoldering herbs, thyme, lavender, sometimes dried dung if you're desperate, and letting the smoke fumigate your body like a haunted sausage. It doesn't remove the smell. It just layers it, like a tragic parfait of misery. In some places, people believed that bathing too often made you sick. That's right. Cleanliness was seen as suspicious. If you bathed regularly, people assumed you were either foreign, untrustworthy, or trying to seduce the local lord. So instead, they recommended dry bathing, which is medieval for pretend you're clean and hope no one notices. This involved rubbing yourself down with cloths soaked in wine, vinegar, or urine. Yes, again with the urine. Because if there's one thing medieval people loved more than superstition, it was recycling body fluids. At this point, you've tried nearly every substance available in your one-street village. You've rubbed mud on yourself, oil, beer, honey. At one point, you even tried rubbing yourself with a pigeon feather, which didn't help at all and only angered the pigeon. The real problem? You live in a world where bacteria is both a mystery and a roommate. No one knows what germs are. Disease comes from miasmas, bad air. So if it smells bad, it must be dangerous. Which is ironic, because everyone smells bad, including the priests who tell you that body odor is a sign of humility. And don't forget the medieval medical professionals who recommend treatments like bloodletting, leeching, or applying mashed garlic to your armpits to rebalance your humors. You try this. The garlic burns. Your skin turns red. But hey, now you smell like a walking breadstick. You sit on a stool, shirt off, skin red, herbs falling from your sleeves like botanical dandruff. A dog walks by, sniffs, whimpers, leaves. That's how you know you've gone too far. Eventually, you settle into a routine. Each morning, you pick one of three options. Try to smell better using vinegar and herbs. Pretend it doesn't matter and lean into the musk. Blame someone else, usually the French. You cycle through them depending on mood, weather, and how much rosemary you haven't already smeared on your chest. You're not alone in this struggle, of course. Everyone around you is doing the same. It's an unspoken agreement, a quiet suffering, a community bonded by sweat, sorrow, and an overwhelming need for soap. And then, once a week, if you're lucky, you get to bathe. It's a special occasion. You fill a large wooden tub with water heated over a fire. It takes forever. You throw in some dried herbs, maybe a splash of milk if you're feeling decadent. The water is murky and slightly green. You step in. It's too hot, then too cold. Then just right for about 45 seconds. You wash quickly, efficiently, because this is a shared tub and your cousin is next. By the end, you feel reborn. Sort of. You dry yourself with a linen cloth that smells like smoke and fungus, put on your least stiff shirt, and bask in your temporary freshness. For an hour, maybe two, you don't smell like regret. But then the day begins. The walking, the sweating, the cows, the fire smoke, the goats that always seem a little too interested in your knees. And by nightfall, you're back to being a symphony of aromas no human should ever produce. You lie in bed, arms out, legs spread, trying to air yourself out like a loaf of bread. You hear a rat chewing something in the corner, a distant shout, the creak of someone dying of foot, rot 2 houses down, the sweet lullaby of medieval village life. And just as your eyelids start to close, just as the herbal smoke and garlic fumes lull you into unconsciousness, you whisper to yourself, "Tomorrow, tomorrow, I try the ashes." And then you sleep, stinking, dreaming, but oddly hopeful. You wake up face down on what can only be described as a medieval crime scene. The straw mattress beneath you is damp. From what? Don't ask. It could be condensation, spilled soup, or last night's dreams leaking out of your pores. Either way, the texture is alarming. 1/2 moldy oatcake, 1/2 neglected barn cat. Your back aches. Your legs feel like you tried to joust a cart. And your breath, well, your breath smells like betrayal. The kind of betrayal that involved onions, dried fish, and a questionable cup of something someone swore was medicinal wine but definitely tasted like old vinegar filtered through disappointment. You open one eye. There's a spider. On your cheek. You stare at it. It stares back. Neither of you blink. Eventually, it leaves. Probably because you smell worse than it does. That's fair. You're not even mad. So here we are again. Day 5 of what scholars would one day call the long, uninterrupted stink. And your armpits have reached a state of sentience. You swing your feet onto the cold dirt floor. A rat scurries by, dragging a crust of bread it definitely stole from you. You consider fighting it. Then remember you're too sore from yesterday's failed attempt at making your own deodorant out of pine tar and goat milk. Let's take a moment to appreciate that failure. The idea seemed brilliant at the time. Pine tar smells sharp and clean, you said. Goat milk is soothing, you said. What could go wrong? Everything. Everything went wrong. You boiled them together. The smell was immediate and violent, like someone had tried to make a candle out of a Viking's shoe. You cooled the mixture, dabbed it onto your underarms, and then spent the next 4 hours running around the village shirtless, trying to put out what can only be described as chemical regret. People stared. A baby cried. One of the monks said a prayer and threw holy water at you. It sizzled. So, today, you go back to basics. Back to the humble, desperate tools of the medieval peasant trying not to smell like compost that's learned to beg for death. You reach for your pouch of dried herbs. It contains a few wilted mint leaves, some lavender you definitely overhandled, a single shriveled rose petal that now looks like beef jerky. You crush them together and rub the powder into your tunic because your skin is still recovering from yesterday's incident. It's fine. Not good, but fine. You smell like a pantry that hasn't been cleaned since the Crusades, which, frankly, puts you ahead of most people in your village. Let's pause for a moment and address something critical to your survival. Your medieval hygiene routine isn't just about social comfort. It's about survival. Because in this charming age of lice, plague, and theology-based medicine, your body odor isn't just unpleasant, it's potentially political. Smell the wrong way, and people think you're diseased. Smell too clean, and they'll accuse you of heresy, vanity, or possibly consorting with demons. There's a narrow band of acceptable stink, and you are constantly surfing it like a desperate peasant on a rotting log. Let's talk rituals. You head to the town's public bathhouse. Yes, those existed. In fact, throughout parts of medieval Europe, especially in the early and high Middle Ages, public bathhouses were a thing. That is, until the church got nervous about them. Because apparently, the idea of strangers seeing each other's ankles while washing was somehow more threatening than, I don't know, cholera. Still, you're lucky. Your village still has a bathhouse. It's run by a man named Albrecht, who has one eye, no teeth, and the most aggressive unibrow in Christendom. He charges you 2 copper pennies or a chicken foot, whichever you've got handy. Today, you've got the foot. Inside, it's dim and smoky. There's a giant wooden tub filled with water the color of soup broth. It smells like sweat, chamomile, and broken promises. You slip in. It's hot. Steaming. The heat hits your skin like a loving slap from a grandmother who's disappointed in your life choices. You bathe. With a cloth. And soap. Let's define soap. Medieval soap is a harsh, lye-based monster made by boiling wood ash and animal fat together. It's caustic. Soapy, yes. But also slightly flammable if handled improperly. The result is a grayish brick that scrapes your skin like an apology written in sandpaper. You scrub. You yelp. A nearby washerwoman gives you a look that says, first time. You nod. She smirks. This is her version of a spa day. When you get out, your skin is raw. Red. But marginally less coated in microbial despair. You dry yourself with a linen rag, so rough it may as well be a horse blanket. You leave feeling, for the first time in a week, vaguely human. This lasts about 30 minutes. Then, the sweat returns. You step out into the sun, and within moments you're glistening like a roast pig at a festival. Your clean shirt sticks to your body like a wet parchment scroll. A breeze picks up, and dust adheres to you like you're being seasoned. By nightfall, you're back to smelling like a reluctant onion left in a monastery basement. You lie down. Stare at the wooden beams above your head. They creak ominously. One drips something. You tell yourself it's water. That's a lie. But it's the kind of lie that helps you sleep. Let's talk about the myths. Some medieval folk believed that certain smells could protect them. From disease. From sin. From bad vibes. which is why people wore little pouches of herbs around their necks or carried cloves in their mouths or chewed angelica root until they cried. You try all of these. You chew a clove. It burns. Your mouth goes numb. You accidentally swallow it and cough for 15 straight minutes. The village baker thinks you're possessed. At one point, you even try suspending a tiny bag of marjoram from your belt. It dangles there, sad and hopeful, like a deodorant air freshener for your groin. It does nothing, but you admire the effort. Eventually, you realize there's no beating the stink. You can only manage it. Like taxes, or relatives, or that weird spot on your back that's either a mole or a permanent splash of berry wine. So you start timing your interactions. You visit people downwind. You talk fast to get conversations over with. You carry a wooden fan carved by your cousin that works exactly 6% of the time. And still, the smell wins. But here's the weird part. You get used to it. You build a smell tolerance. You and your friends all exist within the same fog of bodily consequence. You bond over it, laugh about it, complain bitterly. It becomes the background music of your life. And that, in the end, is what medieval deodorant really was. Not a product, not a solution, but a shared, tragic understanding that everyone smells like old soup, and that's just part of being alive. You curl into your straw mattress. The rat comes back, brings a friend. You don't care. Your skin still tingles from a bath. Your pits smell like desperation and rosemary. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, you'll try a mixture of ashes and lemon balm. Probably set something on fire. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, you sleep. And you dream of soap that doesn't hurt. You wake up, and something feels off. It's not the usual, oh no, I've fused with my straw mattress again, kind of off. Nor is it the was that a rat or a prophetic vision flavor of unease. No, this is different. This is olfactory dread. The kind of nose-deep existential terror that hits before your eyes have even opened. You sniff. You recall. You whimper a little. It's you. Again. But this time, it's personal. Your body odor has evolved overnight. It now carries notes of desperation, onions, and possibly mild betrayal. Your armpits smell like they've entered a second puberty, and your undergarments, which, to be clear, haven't been washed since Pentecost, are no longer passive participants in your hygiene routine. They are hostile actors. You sit up. Your back sticks to the linen. Linen, here, meaning rough, crunchy rag made from plant fibers and heartbreak. You stand. Stretch. Something cracks. Probably your dignity. And now, once again, it's time to confront the medieval day. The challenge? Surviving it without peeling paint off the walls with your scent. Let's talk about the clothing situation. Because deodorant is only part of the puzzle. If you're going to live in a society where full-body funk is expected, you've got to dress smart. And by smart, we mean with the least chafing and possible mildew. You own, at most, 3 garments. A wool tunic, stiff from weather and regret. A linen undertunic, theoretically white once, now authentically peasant-colored. A cloak that smells like firewood and old stew. You don't have underpants. Or socks. You have wraps, basically long strips of cloth you wind around your legs like a sad mummy trying to pass as a shepherd. The trick to staying fresh? Layering. No, not like modern layering. There's no Gore-Tex. Just hope. You wear linen closest to the skin because it absorbs sweat, then a tunic over that to trap the smells where they belong, within. You pull your clothes on, noticing that your undertunic has achieved a rigidity usually reserved for armor. It crackles slightly. You pretend it's normal. You dab under your arms with a bit of vinegar-soaked cloth. It stings, which means it's working. That's the medieval motto. Really, if it burns, it's probably helping. Now for today's deodorant experiment, a poultice of sage, rosemary, and powdered oak bark. You mash it all up in a mortar borrowed from the village healer, who definitely uses it for both medicine and cursing her enemies. The paste is thick, brown, and smells earthy. You apply it under your arms with the kind of gentle caution usually reserved for defusing bombs. It's cold, clammy. There's a twig in there. You soldier on. You step outside. The sky is gray. The mud is thick. You immediately slip and fall into what you hope is just mud and not a pig's failed escape plan. You're fine. Just dirty. Again. But you notice, for a brief, shining moment, you don't smell as bad. The herbal paste seems to be doing its job. Your armpits smell like a garden. A damp, neglected one, sure, but still, it's an upgrade from barn interior at high noon. You start your morning rounds. You pass the cooper's wife. She nods. Doesn't recoil. You walk by the butcher. He waves. Doesn't gag. You stop by the well, and the local alewife says, "You smell herbal today." Success. Let's take a minute to appreciate how rare that is. Because most of the time, medieval deodorizing methods fell into one of three categories. A. Things that smelled good but did nothing. B. Things that smelled bad but were believed to protect you. C. Things that caused burns and possibly divine punishment. If you were a noble, you had access to exotic spices, sandalwood, cinnamon, musk. If you were a monk, you smelled like wax, parchment, and anxiety. If you were you smelled like whatever was growing behind your house and hadn't been trampled by a cow. Now, let's look at how the elite handled their smell. Because, plot twist, they didn't necessarily smell better. They just had more things to mask it with. Perfumed oils. Pomadois, basically a metal ball filled with strong-smelling herbs. Cloaks soaked in rosewater. Gloves that doubled as emergency olfactory shields. They'd anoint their bodies with blends of almond oil, rosewater, crushed violet petals, then layer that with musk from deer glands and civet from the rear end of a very angry cat-like animal. It was a cocktail of floral notes and animal panic. You rub a crushed mint leaf on your neck and pray. But every now and then, you catch a whiff of yourself and think, not bad. This, in medieval terms, is victory. You don't smell like fish, or manure, or fear. You just smell alive. You wander through the marketplace. The smells here are a mix of spices, animals, mold, and ambition. You're holding your own. A small child throws a turnip at you. You dodge it. You're practically radiant. Midday, disaster strikes. It's hot. You've been walking. You've eaten a bowl of barley mush that did something deeply unholy to your digestive tract. You're sweating like a pilgrim who took the wrong fork in the road and ended up at a leper colony by mistake. The poultice is failing. Fast. You retreat behind the blacksmith's shed and, in a moment of desperate inspiration, dab yourself with a sprig of thyme you've been keeping for emergencies. It helps. Barely. And now comes your afternoon saving grace. A merchant. Passing through. Selling exotic hygiene remedies from the East. His cart smells like cinnamon, oranges, and aggressive marketing. He sells you a small sack of what he claims is Arabian perfume powder. You sniff it. It's mostly dirt, but good-smelling dirt. You mix it with a splash of vinegar and apply it. It stings. The merchant grins. That means it's working, he says. Ah, yes. Our old friend. By sundown, your scent has settled into something between herbal poultice and lightly roasted festival chicken. You're not mad. It's progress. You return home. Peel off your clothes like a snake shedding regret. You hang them by the fire, where they stiffen into the shapes of your worst decisions. You wipe yourself down with a cloth. You rinse your feet in a bowl of water that was once clean, but is now a tragic tea of toad jam and soap flakes. And then, for tonight, your grand finale, a sleep sachet. A little cloth bag filled with lavender and hops, tucked under your pillow to keep dreams sweet and lice confused. You lay down. You sigh. Your pits are mildly inflamed, but you've smelled worse. You've been worse. Today was okay. Above you, the wooden beams creak. A beetle falls onto your chest. You flick it off. It's fine. And just before sleep takes you, you whisper into the void. Tomorrow, I try elderflower. Then, sleep. And the scent of sage. You wake up in darkness. Not metaphorical darkness. Literal. The fire's gone out. The coals are cold. And you can't see your own hand in front of your face, which is probably a blessing. Because if you could see your hand, you'd remember it's been several days since you trimmed your fingernails and they're now edging dangerously into goblin talon territory. Your nose twitches. You're not alone. There is a smell. A new smell. Not the usual blend of wet wool, peasant dread, and culinary resignation. No, this is worse. It's unfamiliar. Sharp. Like cabbage that studied necromancy. You sit up. The smell follows you. You sniff your armpit. You recall. You sniff the other one. You briefly consider self-exorcism. It's official. You've invented a new category of body odor. One the medieval world is not prepared for. You stumble to the door of your hovel, yank it open, and step into the icy air. It's not quite dawn yet. The sky looks like dishwater, and the stars are blinking out like they've decided this part of the timeline just isn't worth watching anymore. You take a breath of fresh air, or at least, air that smells more like wet moss and less like your inner elbow. This morning's goal, containment. You're not trying to smell good anymore. That dream died somewhere around chapter 3. You're now aiming for tolerable for brief social contact, or as it's known in your time, not getting accused of demonic possession. You start by stripping off your tunic. You hold it at arm's length like a flag of surrender. The cloth has gone stiff in places it shouldn't. You beat it against a rock. Dust flies off in thick clouds. At least 40% of it is dead skin cells. You wince. You keep going. You soak your linen undertunic in the communal basin outside your hovel. The water turns brown almost immediately. A frog swims away in terror. You don't blame it. Then you get to work on yourself. You scrub your body with cold water and a handful of crushed rosemary and sand. Yes, sand. Because exfoliation isn't new, just horrible. Your skin feels raw. You emerge from the process looking like you lost a fight with an herbal cheese grater. You dry off with a piece of sackcloth that smells vaguely of turnips and effort. Then, your piece de resistance, a new, experimental deodorant made from quicklime and wine vinegar. You heard about this from the blacksmith's apprentice, who got it from his cousin, who read it in a herbal guide that may or may not have been partially eaten by a goose. Regardless, you mix the ingredients, stir them into a paste, and slap it on like someone trying to patch a leaking barrel. It burns. Like, really burns. You wave your arms frantically, as if air will help. It doesn't, but you feel alive, and possibly flammable. Still, after a few minutes, the pain subsides into a dull ache and the smell? Gone. Replaced with the sharp, biting scent of alchemical optimism. You get dressed in your second-best tunic, the one with fewer patches and only a mild smell of old soup, and make your way toward the village square. Today is market day, which means people, and smells, and judgment. You walk past a fishmonger whose stall is indistinguishable from a crime scene. A pile of herring greets you with dead eyes. The smell is aggressive, like the sea slapped you in the face and then sued for damages. You move on. A pig farmer is arguing with a wool trader about the price of lanolin-soaked fleece. They both smell like the underside of a summer barn, but at least you no longer stand out. You blend in, like a stinky ninja. Then comes the true test. You pass by Beatrice. Beatrice, the baker's daughter. She is beautiful. She is radiant. She once smiled at you during Lent, and your heart has never fully recovered. You hold your breath as she walks past. She sniffs the air, pauses, looks in your direction. You freeze. She says, "You smell like vinegar and smoke." You nod solemnly. "Thank you." She raises an eyebrow, smiles, and walks on. You almost faint from the sheer, emotional intensity of it all. But it gets better. Because just behind her, the priest's assistant waves you over. He says, "We're preparing for the feast of Saint Aloysius. We need help fumigating the altar linens. You seem to have a strong scent profile. Want to help?" You do. Because now, finally, your smell has become a tool. You are not just a victim of the times. You are a participant. You spend the afternoon boiling vinegar with dried lemon peel. Where did he get lemons? No one knows, soaking cloths, and learning about the church's terrifying belief that bad smells equal sin. In fact, there was a whole movement in medieval theology that believed foul odors were a direct result of the fall of man. That paradise smelled like roses and frankincense, but earth smelled like us. Imperfect, sweaty, mortal. So by that logic, every armpit is a theological crisis. You are not just sweaty. You are fallen. But here's the kicker. Because good smells were associated with sanctity, saints were often reported to smell amazing even after death. This phenomenon was called the odor of sanctity. Your friend Gerald swears he smelled roses coming from a dead friar once. Gerald also drinks candle wax when he's nervous, so take that with a grain of salt. Still, the belief stuck, good smells equals holy. Bad smells equals sinful. Which really puts pressure on your deodorant game. Back at home, you decide to get creative. You rummage through your herb stash, mint, sage, crushed violets, dried apple peels, stale breadcrumbs, don't ask. You mix them all with lard and shape them into tiny, fragrant patties. You call them pitch pastilles. They smell? Fine. A little like spoiled pie, but in a comforting way. You rub them under your arms. You feel ridiculous. You feel powerful. You sleep that night not reeking of defeat, but of expired fruit optimism. And you dream of a world where deodorant comes in sticks, where you don't have to boil goat urine to feel acceptable, where people shower daily with pressure nozzles and soap that doesn't double as wart medicine. You dream of the 21st century. But then you roll over, smack your head on a wooden beam, and remember, you're still here. It's still 1347. And tomorrow you're trying charcoal mixed with dried nettles. Because science. You wake up to the unmistakable sound of chicken screaming. Not clucking. Not squawking. Screaming. Because one of them has gotten stuck in the butter churn again. This is, somehow, the second time this week. You don't even own the butter churn. The chicken just likes to make bad choices. You groan and sit up. Immediately, you become aware of two things. Your armpits smell like you stored onions in them. You're sweating, and you haven't even moved yet. Welcome back to the Middle Ages, where your body is a problem and deodorant is a hope wrapped in herbs and lies. You shift under your blanket, which is more a collection of stitched-together burlap wishes than actual fabric, and you notice a new smell. It's earthy, slightly smoky, but with strong undertones of "I used expired pig fat to moisturize last night." You scratch your head. That's when you remember you tried charcoal and dried nettles under your arms yesterday. It sort of worked, until the charcoal got wet and stained your tunic, and then someone at the market thought you'd been possessed by a coal spirit. You sigh. It's time to try something new. But first, before we dive nose first into today's fragrant medieval adventure, do me a favor, like this video. Subscribe if your standards have dipped low enough to enjoy historical hygiene horror, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I like knowing which corner of the world is dozing off while I describe ye old pit maintenance. Back to you. You crawl out of bed. Your joints creak like a haunted rocking chair. Your knees pop with the sound of ancient breadsticks breaking. You splash cold water on your face. Your body protests. Your pores beg for mercy. Today's experiment, urine. Yes, urine. Don't make that face. Okay, actually, go ahead and make it. Because even in the Middle Ages, this was weird. But people swore by it. Specifically, aged urine, also known as lant. It was used for everything from tooth whitening to laundry to cleaning wounds to tanning leather. Somewhere along the line, someone decided, you know what this needs? Armpits. So, with the enthusiasm of someone who's already given up, you find the communal pee bucket. Yes, that's a thing. You filter out the bits, don't ask what bits means, pour some into a small cup and dilute it with rose water. And then, you apply it. With a cloth. It's warm. It's acidic. It smells like someone tried to pickle a sin. You hold still for a moment. You wait. You don't die. So that's good. Honestly, it kinda works. At least in the sense that now you smell so strongly of something that isn't sweat, people might not notice the sweat at all. You've weaponized your scent. You are now olfactorily aggressive. You step outside into the morning air. The sky is overcast. The ground is wet. The baker is already yelling at his apprentice about overproof bread. A cow is staring at you with judgment in its eyes. As you walk into town, people give you space. Not much. Just enough to notice. You are like a saint, but if saints reeked of vintage despair. Your friend Thomas walks beside you. He sniffs. Pauses. What in the name of Saint Feculus is that smell? He asks. Science, you reply, vaguely. Because what is science if not making a series of bad decisions and calling it a hypothesis? The truth is, body odor wasn't just an inconvenience in medieval times. It was a constant. Everyone smelled. All the time. But how you smelled mattered. It could define your class, your health, even your soul. The poor smelled like sweat, dirt, and regret. The rich smelled like musk, incense, and expensive denial. Monks smelled like damp parchment and candle wax. Nobles wore perfumes made of ambergris, a waxy substance from a whale's intestines, obviously, and civet, which, let me remind you, comes from the anal glands of a very confused jungle cat. You smell like science, and possibly crime. You head to the village bathhouse. Ah, yes, the medieval bathhouse, where cleanliness meets plague, risk meets social anxiety. There's a fire pit for heating water, a giant tub for communal soaking, and a row of benches where the local gossip unspools faster than a novice spinning thread. You pay your entry fee, one chicken feather and a prayer, and step inside. The heat hits you like a wet wool blanket. Your pores open in panic. You sit in the water, which is only slightly yellow, and think about choices. The urine paste is washing off, mixing into the bath. No one seems to mind. You glance across the bath. Old Marigold is scrubbing her elbows with soap made from tallow and ash. It's basically fat mixed with the ghosts of burned trees. She offers you a bar. You accept. It's gritty. It's greasy. It kinda works. You scrub yourself like you're trying to erase your sins. The water turns murky. A beetle floats past. You don't even flinch. You emerge from the bathhouse clean, for the next 10 minutes, at least, and you realize something strange. You feel hopeful. Because while deodorant as we know it doesn't exist, you've tried everything from dried flowers to fermented goat nonsense, and today, you don't smell great, but you smell interesting. You go home and try your next project, homemade perfume. The recipe is simple. Crushed lavender, a few drops of sheep fat, a splash of wine, and dried citrus peel, which you definitely didn't steal from the priest's dinner plate. You mix it all together in a small jar. Let it steep by the fire. It starts to bubble. That's either chemistry or a warning. You dab it on your wrists, your neck, your armpits. You immediately smell like someone trying to seduce a cheese wheel. It's a start. The rest of your day goes about as well as can be expected. You chase a goose out of your garden. You get mildly cursed by the herbalist for stepping on her calendula. You find a coin that may or may not be cursed. But through it all, through the sweat and dirt and medieval emotional turmoil, you keep experimenting. Because, dear listener, the truth is, deodorant was not just a cosmetic luxury in the Middle Ages. It was survival. It was how you navigated crowded spaces, interacted with strangers, approached your crush without sending them into a coma. You didn't need to smell good. You just needed to smell less bad than usual. And maybe, just maybe, smell different enough to be remembered. That night, you sit by your fire. You take off your tunic. Your skin is mildly irritated, but pleasantly perfumed. You drink a bit of watered-down ale. You dream of future generations with roll-on sticks, scented gels, and ocean breeze as a concept. And as you fall asleep, your pits comfortably lemon-lavender, your feet only slightly damp, your dreams full of nonsense, you whisper to the night, "Tomorrow I try onions." Because it's only weird if it doesn't work. You wake up, and you are immediately confronted with the inescapable truth. Something has died, possibly inside your own armpit. You sniff. You regret it. You briefly consider removing your own arms at the shoulder and starting over. Last night, you tried onions. Raw, crushed onions, mashed into a paste with a bit of vinegar and applied directly under the arms, just like the blacksmith's cousin's second wife said she once read in a French monk's hygiene scroll. You know, credible science. The result? You now smell like a soup kitchen after a thunderstorm. A strong, oily aroma with notes of sadness and impending indigestion. You roll over. The blanket is stuck to your skin. There is a light film of onion grease on your upper chest. You are glistening. You sit up, slowly. You feel like a glazed ham. So before we go any further into this culinary nightmare disguised as hygiene, this is your gentle reminder to like the video. Subscribe if you enjoy wandering through the olfactory horrors of history with me, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what ungodly hour it is. Because if you're hearing this while trying to sleep, I want you to know, you're not alone. We're all marinating in this weird little time travel stew together. Back to you. You stand, stretch, and crack at least 6 joints. 2 of them weren't even yours. A nearby mouse sneezes and dies instantly from your aura of onion. You nod solemnly. It was warned. Today, your goal is simple: fix the smell. Not permanently, you gave up on permanence back in Chapter 2. But temporarily. Just enough to avoid being mistaken for an escaped kitchen demon. You consider your options. You've done vinegar, rosemary, nettles, lard, quicklime, and, well, pea. None of them have brought you peace or a tolerable scent. So today, we're looking at powders. Because yes, medieval people had powders. Not the talcum variety that comes in plastic containers with cartoon bears on the label. No, these were gritty, home-ground, herbal concoctions made with whatever the local apothecary wasn't actively hoarding. You mix your own from crushed sage, dried mint, a bit of powdered alum, and, because you are still clinging to hope, a few rose petals. The result looks like something you'd feed to a sick donkey. But it smells vaguely fresh. You pat it under your arms using a scrap of linen. The texture is not pleasant. Imagine rubbing your skin with flavored sand. But the scent is decent, clean, medicinal, like someone tried to bury a corpse respectfully. Feeling optimistic, you layer on your tunic, the one that still smells faintly of wine and goat spit, and head to town. As you walk, you ponder a question. Why did medieval people even try to smell better? Because let's be honest, it would have been easier to give up entirely. Bathe once a year. Live in olfactory denial. Let the stench become your personal brand. But no, they tried. Poor folks stuffed herbs in their shirts. Nobles wore pomandas, little balls of perfumed wax or spices, like some kind of holy grenade of citrus and privilege. Physicians wore beak masks filled with aromatic herbs to fight plague smells. Because everyone agreed, if it smelled bad, it was probably evil. And to be fair, they weren't entirely wrong. Medical theory at the time was all about miasma, bad air. The belief was that foul smells carried disease. So masking those smells? Health strategy. Like medieval PPE. Except instead of hand sanitizer, you carried a clove-stuffed orange. You reach the village square. A woman is airing out her husband's cloak by hanging it over a pig. The pig does not look pleased. Children run past you yelling about a mysterious pit demon that appeared last night. You pretend not to hear. Your arms tingle slightly from the sage powder. You feel alive. You feel dangerous. You arrive at the apothecary. He's 82 years old, has one working eye, and claims to have treated an archbishop's cousin for melancholy tooth. His breath could fell a horse. You ask for something to make you smell less like medieval tapas. He nods sagely and gives you a small satchel of herbal compound for discouraging social offense. You open it. It contains crushed bay leaves, lavender, burnt salt, something unidentifiable that might be a dead bee. He says to apply it liberally to the dampest regions. You try not to ask follow-up questions. Back home, you mix the herbal powder into melted animal fat. The result? A grainy paste that smells like aggressive tea and wet fireplace. You rub it under your arms. It sticks. It cools. It makes you feel like a mildly enchanted roast. You go to visit the local priest. Not for confession. You already confessed to stepping on 3 frogs and thinking impure thoughts about the barmaid who smells like honey. This visit is purely research. You ask what the church thinks about body odor. He looks horrified, as if you'd asked whether the Pope uses foot powder. But he does explain that saints were supposed to smell good. That if someone smelled too bad, they might be hiding heresy. Or at the very least, a fungal issue. He also tells you about Saint Hildegard of Bingen, who wrote extensively about herbs and body care. She believed that God provided plants to help humans live with dignity, even in their smells. You nod respectfully while making a mental note to look up whether she ever tried garlic paste. Back home again, you have dinner, barley mush with a side of anxiety. You sit by the fire and reflect on your long, stinky journey. And then, as you lay down to sleep, you realize it's not about eliminating odor. It's about managing it. It's about trying. In a world with no plumbing, no privacy, and only a 30% chance your next bath won't give you a skin infection, you're doing your best. Your pits are coated in powdered plants. Your tunic smells like steamed mint. Your toes haven't smelled like bread in days. You are a success story. Tomorrow, you might try juniper ash. Or something made with elderflower. maybe a poultice involving clay and regret. But tonight, you smell like someone who gave a damn. And in the Middle Ages, that's about as close to divine intervention as it gets. You wake up to the slow, creeping realization that your feet are trying to kill you. Not in a dramatic, medieval foot possession kind of way, although that would honestly be less embarrassing, but in the quiet, persistent, fungal way. Your toes itch. Your heels burn. Your right big toe is suspiciously shiny. This is either a cry for help or an evolutionary step backward. You swing your legs off the straw mattress, careful not to brush the chamber pot, or the cat, or whatever that damp cloth is that's been living under your bed since the equinox. You stand up and instantly regret it. Your feet squelch. Yes, squelch. You take a moment to reflect on the fact that somewhere in the world, maybe in the future, there are people waking up with clean socks. Indoor plumbing. Pumice stones that aren't made from actual cursed lava. But not you. No, you live in a world where foot rot is a common cause of social exclusion. And sometimes, death. You live in a world where sandals are made of old leather, twine, and the ever-present hope that you won't step in goat droppings. So today's journey is clear. You're going to try to fix your medieval foot situation. But before we dive toes first into the tragic spa day ahead, this is your gentle reminder, the equivalent of a polite nudge with a wooden spoon, to like the video, subscribe if you're enjoying this odorous historical rabbit hole, and drop a comment with your location and what time it is as you drift off to the gentle sounds of your own imaginary trench foot. It's weirdly comforting knowing we're all falling asleep to the same collective discomfort. Back to you. You sit down with a groan. Your knees pop. Your ankles make a sound like someone tearing cheesecloth underwater. You inspect your feet. They are complicated. There's a blister that's become sentient. A callus that might be gaining altitude. And your left pinky toe is definitely housing a microclimate. You begin by washing them in a wooden basin with lukewarm water, a rare luxury, heated with actual firewood you stole from the church's compost pile. As the grime dissolves, you realize your feet have developed their own scent profile. It's somewhere between bog spirit and wet dog in denial. You dry them off with a rag. Not a clean rag, of course. Clean rags are for nobles and people who haven't yet fought a pigeon for bread crust. But it's dry, and in this world, that counts as hygiene. Now comes the treatment. Today's remedy, ox bile and marigold poultice. Why ox bile? Because apparently, someone in the 12th century decided that if it burns your nose and threatens your soul, it must be healthy. And marigold? That's the friendly neighborhood antifungal. Like the medieval version of a disinfectant wipe, except less convenient and more likely to summon bees. You crush the marigold petals, mix them with the bile, which, frankly, is the color of betrayal, and apply the paste to your toes. It's warm, slimy. It smells like someone cooked stew in an old boot. You wrap your feet in linen strips, then shove them into your softest shoes, meaning the pair with only 3 holes and some structural dignity left. And now you wait. You hobble outside. The morning air is crisp, and the mud is, as always, everywhere. A child throws a clump of it at a chicken. The chicken retaliates by laying an egg in his hood. You shuffle your way toward the market, feet squelching slightly less now, thanks to your herbal toe jam. On the way, you pass the cobbler. He's 67, has 4 teeth, and claims to have invented the heel. You ask him what he recommends for sore, stinking feet. He laughs for 6 full seconds. Then he hands you a lump of wax and says, "Rub this on your boots. Or your feet. Or both. Or neither." It doesn't work, but it smells better than your soul. You nod respectfully and take it. It smells faintly of bees and desperation. Next stop, the apothecary stand. You ask for something to keep one's feet from offending God and man alike. He squints, sniffs your general direction, and hands you a jar of grayish powder. Ingredients include crushed rosemary, burned barley, vinegar crystals, something called blessed salt, which he insists was never technically used in exorcisms. You sprinkle it into your shoes. It tingles. That's either healing or nerve damage. Hard to say at this point. Back at home, you peel off the linen wraps. Your feet look less bad. Not good. But there's less redness. Less angry texture. And for the first time in days, you don't feel like your toes are actively planning mutiny. Feeling bold, you try a medieval foot massage. You use a mix of olive oil, warmed slightly, with a few drops of clove essence stolen from a traveling monk. You rub it in, focusing on the heels, the arches, the weird crunchy spot that might be a rock or a bone fragment. It feels, dare you say, nice. You sit back. Relax. Breathe deeply. Then a knock at the door. It's your neighbor, Edith. She asks if you've been experimenting with that devil lotion again because her pigs are acting anxious. You lie. She knows. But she leaves you be. Later, you head to the evening gathering in the village square. Music plays. Someone juggles. Someone else accuses someone of witchcraft. Standard Tuesday stuff. And you, for once, are not the worst-smelling person there. That honor goes to the baker, whose foot was recently attacked by a goose and is now swaddled in garlic in panic. You dance, a little. Carefully. Your feet ache, but not like before. They're sore, but not offensive. It's a low-grade discomfort. The kind you can live with. Like living next door to someone who sings opera at 2 a.m., but also lends you flour. And as the stars rise and the fire dies down, you walk home with a sense of quiet victory. Yes, you smell faintly of herbs and poultry products. Yes, your shoes are one good rain away from disintegrating. Yes, your toes still look like they've seen things. But for tonight, you don't squelch. You don't wince. You don't scare livestock. You're practically a foot model. And in the medieval world, that's as close to royalty as it gets.